And welcome to the Player Profiler Thursday Night Tailgate. I'm Bradley Stalder, your host for this evening, joined by Emerson Beery. He is one of the writers for Roto Underworld, also a producer, right? Emerson, you do a lot of producing on the back end, but we get to see your beautiful face tonight. Emerson and I will be handling all of your start-sit questions. We'll be going through the preview of tonight's game between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New Orleans Saints. Emerson, how are you doing tonight?
I am fabulous. Great to finally join you for one of these tailgates, considering I'm a bartender. Great to bring a drink to the start-sit questions this week.
Cheers to everyone. If you are joining us for the first time, we periodically will just do a cheers and we'll take a sip, we'll take a drink, and we'll answer some more questions. It's going to be a great time. If you want to put your comments or questions in the chat, that'd be great. So we're going to give you guys a moment to do that. Great content coming up here in just a moment. As I said, Emerson is here joining me, Bradley Stalder, for the Player Profiler Tailgate for Thursday night. Emerson, we've got what's expected to be a pretty low-scoring matchup between the New Orleans Saints and the Jacksonville Jaguars. In fact, if we look at this matchup and the 1 o'clock slates, it looks pretty bleak. We're looking at like 43, 37, 40s, 40.5 over-unders. I mean, we've already seen fewest touchdowns in the NFL since 2010. I'm not expecting a barn burner. What is your outlook for this matchup between the Jaguars and the Saints?
Saints defense is tough. And unfortunately, the scoring that we would expect from the Jacksonville Jaguars is probably going to be down, particularly on a short week in these what usually tends to be an ugly Thursday night game. The Saints on the other side, Derek Carr just hasn't seemed quite right these last couple of weeks, hasn't been attempting those downfield throws that we've been accustomed to early on in the season. It hasn't been as great for Chris Olave. So yeah, I could see this being an uglier game. Travis Etienne is going up, I believe the only player running back that had a semi-decent game against this New Orleans rush defense was Derrick Henry. And, that was a semi-productive week. So I'm not even expecting a lot out of Travis Etienne this week. So unfortunately, Trevor Lawrence not looking like the guy he was last season. Not a lot to get excited about this week, but I think we're going to dive into a couple interesting flex guys, particularly with bye weeks and injuries coming up.
Oh, yeah, the bye week. This is a bye week apocalypse of sorts with all of the injuries, all of the buys. I even just got the notifications right before logging in from Sleeper saying, you left Tazi Spears in your lineup. You have DeAndre Hopkins you still need to remove. Yes, I know, Sleeper. I know I need to remove those guys, but we will take care of that right after the tailgate. That's why it ends at 8 o'clock, not at 8:15. So there is just a little bit of time to make those adjustments before game time. The Saints are favored by 2.5 points at home. This line has shifted from just being a 1-point spread just a day ago, but we had Trevor Lawrence expected to play, expected to start. He looked good in the warmups. However, I have Trevor Lawrence as my quarterback 14 outside the top 12. You mentioned that the Saints defense is tough. Lawrence hasn't looked like himself. We've also seen a really inconsistent Calvin Ridley. An interesting breakdown. I don't know if you saw the tweet that I put out, Emerson, but when Zay Jones plays, Calvin Ridley averages over 21 fantasy points. When Zay Jones does not play, he averages fewer than 8. So with Zay Jones out, are we going to see another bust game from Calvin Ridley against the Saints?
It's, that's exactly what this offense is missing is Zay Jones. It's not making a lot of plays downfield. Zay Jones is that deep threat. We kind of expected Calvin Ridley to be that, but if you've listened to Player Profiler, of course, if you listen to Matt Kelly, he has been dogging on Calvin Ridley. He is a notorious Calvin Ridley hater, I would say, Matt Kelly. So if you listen to Player Profiler a lot, you might not have been on Calvin Ridley from the start. I was wary from a player coming back from a 2-year layoff. Of course, you had people beating the drum after that week, big week 1. And then since then, it's kind of been what we expected. Calvin Ridley being a little bit more the consistent player. I think that continues this week. I think Calvin Ridley's due for a big game. He's going to have some pop-off weeks. He's going to have, 1 out of every 3-4 games, you're going to regret, if he's not in your lineup, you're going to regret it. So, especially with bye weeks coming up, you can't take him out. I think, especially if you drafted him at the 2nd, 3rd round turn where he was going, towards the beginning of the season there. So you're firing up Calvin Ridley this week, but I think he's more of a borderline, wide receiver 3 at this point, borderline wide receiver 2, and just a little bit behind Christian Kirk in my rankings.
Yeah, I have it similarly. I have Kirk at 18 and Calvin Ridley at 24 right now. The expert consensus has Calvin Ridley ahead of Kirk for this week. So I have it flip-flopped. And I believe with Zay Jones out, it's Christian Kirk who plays that wide receiver 2 role. He plays in the 2 wide receiver sets, because who's the other wide receiver is going to play outside? It's not going to be like Tim Jones or Jamal Agnew. No, they're going to put Christian Kirk out there, and Kirk's going to earn his targets. It's also, I think, going to be an Evan Ingram game. Ingram has, in the games that Zay Jones has played, those were the 2 games where he didn't get double-digit fantasy points. Every other game, Jones has been out double-digit fantasy points. So it's clear that there's a redistribution of targets, a redistribution of looks. And I think that, Evan Ingram, set it and forget it, tight end 1 moving forward. I was lower on him. That was a kind of a miss by me. I had to sprinkle him a little bit this off season, but I thought that Evan Ingram was not going to perform as well. But he's done well enough. He's gotten a pretty consistent floor, and he's going to be starting for you. You probably don't have better options.
No, it's been tight end. You're feeling good about 3 or 4 guys. So Evan Ingram is a huge success story. I wasn't taking a lot of Evan Ingram because I was the guy taking tight end, especially, in our underdog drafts and things like that. I was taking tight end with my last 3 or 4 picks, unless I did get Travis Kelce. So it saved me with a lot of these players. Of course, there was a couple that I didn't have a lot of exposure to. Sam Laporta, Evan Ingram was one of those guys. So I'm missing out there, but I feel pretty good. I had a Trey McBride sighting this past weekend, so that is great for my underdog teams. I am way too exposed to Trey McBride, so I was very happy to see a little bit of a higher snap share.
Yeah, I was not expecting Zach Ertz to come back and earn like 8 targets a game. Goodness gracious. Ruckus jumps in and asks, single or double IPA, Bradley? I don't look, I will not turn down a beer. I will not turn down a beer if I'm given an IPA. However, I will not freely choose an IPA. That's just, sorry, Ruckus. I will not do it. I don't know your thoughts on that, Emerson.
No, I'm a bartender, and I'm not a big fancy beer. If I'm usually more of a cocktail, whiskey, tequila guy. And if I am drinking beer, it's usually like an easy drinking lager. I don't like light beer, but just like a local lager, Pilsner, something easy drinking. IPAs, I can do a stout every once in a while, but the porters, none of that stuff, I'm not a big fan. But double IPAs, disgusting.
Double IPAs, man, the hops on hops. It's like a hop squared. It's just too much. So if you guys want to put your start sit questions in, we've got a couple deep flyers. You might have to flex Rashid Shaheed this week. You might be in a couple leagues, Emerson, I'm having to put Rashid Shaheed in my flex spot, or my wide receiver spot, because of course we are professionals here. We move our Thursday night players out of our flex spots into our starting wide receiver spots. But Rashid Shaheed has had boom bust games, and we've seen 2 top 12 finishes so far. Is Rashid Shaheed going to have a possible boom game? I put it at like a 30-40% chance that he gets about 12 fantasy points.
It's been tough. It's been really hard to predict. He had the big week 1 and he had a big week last week, and then a lot of net production in between there. It's just, can he make a big play downfield? Because if we're talking about the efficient wide receivers in this offense, it's Chris Olave, it's Rashid Shaheed. Michael Thomas is out there just with like the worst yards per target, average depth of target, just near the bottom of the NFL. But I am actually starting Michael Thomas over Rashid Shaheed this week. I highlighted Michael Thomas in an article that I put out for the Sports Gambling Podcast Network today as a player that I predict having a touchdown tonight. I pick players based on flex opportunity. He has the most targets in the league without a touchdown. Carr is not able to throw as deep. He's not targeting Olave and Shaheed downfield as much with that hurt shoulder, although that changed a little bit last week. He was heaving it downfield last week. So we'll see. That may be changes going forward. But I actually like Michael Thomas's odds of scoring a touchdown tonight, and I am starting him ahead of Rashid Shaheed.
All right, you heard it here. Emerson calling the touchdown for Michael Thomas and over Rashid Shaheed for week number 7, Thursday Night Football. You know, Michael Thomas, we have to say he's at least back on the field, right? He is at least earning some targets, which we have to give him credit. He had missed almost 2 years worth of play over the course, 2 years of play. We saw a couple productive games last year, but you know, it's really important to be diving deep into these injury riddled players. How are they injury prone? And we have an app for that. So let's hear from Matthew Kelly about our injury finder and our data analysis program.
All right, I want to take a moment today to talk to you about data analysis. The data analysis tool, we listen to the users. What do you want? What do you need? And we made it happen. We added popular reports like a fantasy scoring report, air yards report. And if you want to create a new report, but you don't necessarily want to look through every field, we have quick results. Hey, show me the most popular passing data. Show me the most popular rushing data, fantasy data. Done. And the thing just is much faster than it's ever been. And the report builder got a lot easier. I mean, check this out. We break it down into offense, defense. Show me just fantasy data elements. And then when you get results, hey, show me by draft year. Let's take a look at just certain players that played a certain number of snaps or a certain number of games last year. This is the tool that so many of you have been asking for, plus a bunch of dream features that Billy wanted and Cody wanted and I wanted and Dario wanted. So go to the fantasy tools section, click on data analysis, or go to playerprofiler.com/data-analysis.
That's right. Go to playerprofiler.com/data-analysis. Emerson, we've got some players that are expected to play now in Thursday night. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, we talked about him. We're a little bit lower outside the top 12 for him this week. Jamal Williams, though, is making his return. And Jamal Williams spent time on the IR, dealt with an injury, but now is back. But so is Alvin Kamara. And Jamal Williams, limited practice the whole week. Kamara has been a fantasy buoy for many teams that had been hurt. Maybe you had Devon Achane, and now you've had that smooth transition from Achane to Kamara. How are we approaching this? Is it going to be a committee? Is it going to be a split? Or is Kamara just going to continue to work ahead of Jamal Williams? How do you project that working out for this Thursday night game?
It'll be interesting. We haven't seen really the full strength Jamal Williams since week 1. You figure that Jamal Williams, if healthy, and it's really hard to tell with these players on their first game back, I think, is he going to be kind of just more out there? They're going to give him on a snap count, just give him a few reps, or is he ready to go? So Alvin Kamara getting a lot of, this is not typical Alvin Kamara work, 22 rushing attempts in week 5, 19 last week. That's not what we're usually seeing from Alvin Kamara. I can't figure that's what they want to do with him, is particularly, as he's gotten older, a little bit less of, we're kind of, so I heard somebody say the corpse of Alvin Kamara. I was listening to another podcast. I can't remember who said that, so I apologize for that, but that's what we're seeing out there right now. I wouldn't go that far, but we're certainly, the best days are certainly behind him. So I have to figure when Jamal Williams, and maybe if it's not this week, I have to figure is when he is back to 100%, he is going to get a lot of that early down work. Alvin Kamara probably going more back to his pass catching role and still getting that 10, 12 rush attempts a game. So I think that actually will hurt him, particularly because he is becoming more of a volume dependent player now. Those explosive plays are gone. So I'm still firing up Alvin Kamara this week. I think he's a strong RB2, but yeah, I'm certainly wary of Jamal Williams, and I'll be keeping a close eye out. I think, but in his first game back, I have Kamara pretty high up in my rankings.
Yeah, the expert consensus and my rankings have him at running back 9. Maybe I make just a little tweak, but I don't see him outside the top 12 given the bye weeks that we're experiencing. But I do agree with you, once we see that Jamal Williams is back to full strength. Kamara's probably going to be capped at a mid to high end running back too, given his lack of efficiency. I mean, look over the last couple games, 22 for 80, 19 for 68. Those are not going to get it done. And then, I mean, in his first week back, he set the NFL record for fewest receiving yards on 13 or more receptions. 33 receiving yards. That's wild. Just wild. But he's not finished outside the top 12 of running backs in half PPR since he's back from the suspension. I still have confidence in Kamara starting him despite Jamal Williams. But we're not starting Jamal Williams, right? We're trying to find other options. We're first week back. There's not a lot of confidence. We want to see it first, right, Emerson?
Yeah, I have Kamara at RB13, and that's because a lot of this, these Thursday night matchups are always ugly. It's going to be scoring opportunities going to be few and far between. So yeah, Jamal Williams, certainly somebody, even in a bye week, in a week that was riddled with injuries, I think you can definitely do better.
All right, we've got a question here from Facebook, Emerson. Bernie Alvarez from the Facebook. I have Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk. Do I play both? Which one? Or can I pivot to Marquise Hollywood Brown? I mean, I have my thoughts, but Emerson, I'd like to pick your brain too as to how you have these three sifting out in the rankings. And does the scoring format matter, or is it just straight up pick them?
I straight up pick them for me. I like Kirk and Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown has quietly put together a very good season. I know people were kind of forgetting about him in drafts. The sight of Dobbs leading this offense, nobody wanted to see. However, Marquise Brown certainly make a case. And this is a guy who, I like as a buy low potentially. It's hard to get worse than the offensive situation he's in right now. Are they going to trade him coming up as well? So Marquise Brown is somebody who I'm like I said, I'm waiting for a Calvin Ridley pop week. I'm not picking it for Thursday Night Football, though. I like Marquise Brown more than I like Calvin Ridley this week. So I'm firing up Marquise Brown and Christian Kirk for me.
Yeah, Hollywood Brown, 4 of his 6 games finishing as wide receiver 26 on the week or better. And then in the 2 weeks that he did not finish as wide receiver 26 or better, 5 and 11 targets. I mean, you can't argue with an average of 8 targets per game. Yes, it is Josh Dobbs, but Josh Dobbs has played admirably. Maybe not quite Geno Smith 2.0, but he's handled himself in a way that has bridged the gap between now Kyler Murray is activated off of the physically. The window is open. We're expecting him to play. The Arizona Cardinals expect him to play. So Hollywood Brown, I agree with you. Those are going to be the 2, Christian Kirk and Hollywood Brown, as top 20 plays. I have Calvin Ridley outside the top 20 for this week. So yes, I agree with that ranking. Now here's an interesting player that I want to get your take on, Emerson. We're going to move to the tight end position, and maybe not the tight end position, but kind of the tight end position. If you ask the FFPC, they will tell you he is not a tight end. He is in fact a quarterback, and he will not be contributing in any tight end scoring for the FFPC this year. But Taysom Hill is a tight end on Fantasy Pros. He's probably a tight end in your fantasy league. He set a career high with 8 targets and had 7 receptions, also a career high last week in week 6. Juwan Johnson out again. Are we expecting another involved Taysom Hill in the passing game?
No, he does this all the time. He does this like 3 times a year. And then because the tight end position is the way it is, he's going to end up being like a top 12, top 15 tight end on the year. And you'll be like, how did that happen? Maybe I should have started Taysom Hill more. Now, you can't predict when these games are going to happen. Although, I mean, yeah, I guess if you're in dire straits at tight end, I mean, you could do worse than a pop play, but he's a low tight end too for me. And that's because of, the upside for a big week that, you could see just as easily 2 to 3 points this week. You can't trust Taysom Hill's production. I know this at this point after years and years of chasing those points.
I do have Taysom Hill above the consensus. I have him at 16. Consensus is at 19. But for instance, like I'm playing Michael Mayer over Taysom Hill, or I'm playing Jonnu Smith over Taysom Hill. Like we're not getting cute, but you can't ignore that the Saints utilized him in a way that was completely different from what we've seen over the last 3 years, given their need at the tight end position. Foster Moreau is still dealing with that ankle. He's expected to play in this game, but he missed a couple games because of the ankle injury. Juwan Johnson out. Jimmy Graham is a ghost. That's who's dust. That is who's a ghost, Emerson, is Jimmy Graham. So I am, we're always tantalized by Taysom Hill. But at this point, I agree with you. There are worse plays. However, let's not get cute. You've got to sift through who is trending upward. And I would say, for instance, Michael Mayer is one of those players that is significantly trending upward. Yeah. Okay. Any other takes on Taysom Hill before we move on?
I would not start Taysom Hill. I mean, I get it. Like I said, you could do worse, I suppose, especially considering the tight end landscape than a complete dart throw. But I'm going a few other directions before I'm going Taysom Hill.
Well, I guess we haven't talked about a couple other players. Derek Carr is coming off that AC joint injury. He ended up not missing any games, but in the game he first came back from, it was clear that he was hampered, and then he's progressively improved. The Jacksonville Jaguars, aren't a defense that I'm afraid of necessarily, but we mentioned it's a Thursday night game. It's a short week. This is a game at home for the Saints. So I'm wondering if there's at least going to be like quarterback 2 appeal for Derek Carr now, given what we saw last week. Derek Carr was the quarterback 10. He threw 50 passes, 353 yards, and had a touchdown. But I think that's kind of the ceiling for Derek Carr is a low end quarterback 1, probably mid to back end quarterback 2. I mean, you're probably looking for other options of Derek Carr, but I mean, Derek Carr or Josh Dobbs.
I have Derek Carr ahead this week. I do see the Jacksonville Jaguars as an exploitable pass defense. I don't have it in front of me when I was writing the article today. I think they're bottom 7 or 8 in pass yards allowed. So yeah, it's certainly not a defense that I'm afraid of. I do expect Derek Carr to connect. We're seeing, like I was saying, we're seeing that yards per attempt creep back up to where it was pre AC joint injury. It was at 7 yards or so last week. So I like Derek Carr to connect with Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed on a deep play. I think Michael Thomas is going to get some volume too. Yeah, I like Derek Carr this week. Joshua Dobbs, we saw, I think, last week a little bit more of what we're going to start seeing. I think this was the first month was a little bit of a revelation, and I think this Arizona offense is going to start to begin to struggle.
Yeah, teams are starting to figure out these first couple week sensations, the Jordan Loves, the Josh Dobbs, right?
Absolutely. And I always tell you, it's interesting because I think players, like when their first couple games, whether it be if they haven't started in a while and they're backup, or if they're just coming into the league, that can be that can be some of their best games. We saw Patrick Mahomes. His best statistical season was his rookie or his sophomore season, his first year as a starter.
Right.
When defenses get film on you and when they figure out how to take away what you're good at, it's a counterpunch, and a lot of quarterbacks, struggle to get up from that punch, and so it happens to everybody. And like you said, Jordan Love and a couple of these other players are seeing that.
All right, we got another question. This is going to be a tough one. Christian Watson or Calvin Ridley? As the Packers fan, I mean, look at I've got the signed Robert Tonyan jersey. I got Lambeau Field signs. I got signed Packers helmets in the background. Like, obviously this is the rose-colored glasses for the Packers, but Emerson, I need someone to level me out. Is it still Christian Watson or are we going Calvin Ridley tonight?
I gotta see it. I gotta see it from Watson first. I'm highlighting Romeo Doubs this week again. He seems to have a lot of chemistry with Jordan Love. Other than a couple bad weeks, Romeo Doubs has been very good this year. I believe he's number 12 in red zone targets, despite having a bye week still. So I'm going to wait to see it from Christian Watson. So I'm firing up Calvin Ridley this week, in my opinion.
Oh, it's so tough because I love Christian Watson. I'm like a truther to the till the day I die. It's gonna be really bad.
Hamstring affecting the athlete.
I know, but he was also horse collar tackled on like that beautiful breakaway run. But it was also clear that like the defense caught up to him, and he was definitely not operating at 100%. So maybe he was operating at like 80%. Still, 80% Christian Watson is he's wide receiver 16 in yards per route run. He's the number one receiver in yards after the catch. Yards. I can't remember the stat. Whatever. He's done really well on the deep passes, and it's really clear that he's been an explosive player. But I agree with you. The chemistry with Dobbs is there. The chemistry with Christian Watson is not. His reception percentage is only about 45% on the season. And Emerson, this is a wild stat. This is one I'm not going to forget. Christian Watson leads all wide receivers in interceptions on targeted passes. So when Jordan Love has targeted him, he's been intercepted the most of all wide receivers. Yes. And he's only played 2 games. So
that's an impressive stat. Actually, I can't think that's a sticky stat, but that's a crazy stat for sure.
It's pretty wild. So at least he's trying with Christian Watson. But, the chemistry, as you mentioned, is not there. I don't think Love is a very accurate quarterback just in general from a macro view. And so if he's going to be throwing the ball down the field, there's just a lot more variance of him hitting or missing. Whereas we know Rodgers, even dealing with the thumb injury, like Rodgers dealt with a broken thumb for half the season last year and still was able to get Christian Watson to be a top 10 wide receiver pretty much on the weekly basis once Watson was playing full time. So, yeah. Oh, man. But this is Denver.
It's a lot different than catching those deep balls from Aaron Rodgers to go into Jordan Love. There's a big difference there. And that, that's what I was a little bit worried about and why I didn't have a lot of Christian Watson unless I was getting him more in that low end wide receiver 2 territory, borderline top 24 wide receiver. It's just, yeah, if we were going to depend on Jordan Love hitting those deep routes, I think that was going to be tough. And Dubs is getting a lot of work this year. So it's like I said, I'm waiting to see it. Christian Watson, it's not like the wheels have fallen off. Like you said, he's been startable when he's been out there. So I think he's going to get back to 100% here. I expect better days ahead.
All right, we got one more question before we'll sign off. Emerson, it's been an absolute treat having you on dissecting Week 7's kickoff between the Saints and the Jaguars. Gerald Alvarado asked, half PPR, are we going Christian Kirk, or are we activating Deontay Johnson off of IR, or are we flexing Elijah Mitchell? I think this is a pretty obvious one. What do you think, Emerson?
I mean, I think we'll be on the same page here. I'm firing up Christian Kirk. I mean, why fix what's not broken? Deontay Johnson, first day back. This Pittsburgh Steelers offense has not been what I hoped it would be, at least. I was kind of on board with a lot of the player profiler faithful here and thinking that this offense was going to take a step forward. It has not. And Deontay Johnson has, although he gets a lot of targets, not been particularly efficient with those. Elijah Mitchell, who knows who's it going to be? If Christian McCaffrey doesn't play this weekend, it's a little bit of a toss-up. So give me Christian Kirk.
I agree. You want the guaranteed points, and Kirk we both have as about a top 20 play. Emerson, as I said, absolute treat. Where can the people find your work? Where can they find your work?
You can find it in a lot of different places. I write a weekly article for Player Profiler covering some of the biggest storylines every week. On Tuesdays, I write and do podcasts for the Sports Gambling Podcast Network and the Face Off Sports Network as well. And then I produce a number of shows that you should check out on Player Profiler, The Big Tilt, The Juice, Player Profiler Today, and new press coverage with Theo Greminger. That's just what I just started up on. So definitely check out all those shows too.
For sure. Check out The Big Tilt in particular. A lot of work goes into that one. And make sure you guys are checking out all of the tailgates. The Thursday night one happens, of course, on Thursdays. We have a Monday night tailgate here at Player Profiler as well. So make sure you're checking out those tailgates. Emerson, it's been great. Make sure you guys are following Emerson on Twitter at Dynasty_analyst. and of course, all of the places where Emerson puts in the good work. All right, on behalf of Emerson, I am Bradley, and until next time, good luck with your Thursday night StartSits, everybody.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.